Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut live stream. How you guys doing? I hope everybody's doing well. Well, before we get started, I want to say one thing. Please don't post your questions multiple times. This is not for everybody, and I apologize that we have to start with this, but last live stream, we had some issues, and the live stream kind of locked up halfway, and I skipped many questions of people who came in time. I take the questions in order. It was because many were just copying the same question over and over and over. This is not fair for others who ask a question, and I try to make myself available to help, but this is not fair for others who are actually here to listen. If I get to your question, I will get to it in the time that we have. But if I don't, you're also welcome to leave a comment on any of the videos and I'll help. But posting your question multiple times, it kind of intrudes on the time of others. So I ask everybody to be considerate of that as we go forward. Having said that, let's dig right in. What do you say, guys? Are you guys ready? Let's do this. So, D. Noel, 2013 Prius with over 400,000 miles. All right, that is pretty good. And live in a rural area with bad roads. I have it loaded down with supplies when returning from town and was wondering if the springs, shocks, and struts for the Prius V would fit. So honestly, this one will be trial and error. They look similar, but are they going to physically fit? Is there any change in the body? I wouldn't have that information right off the top of my head. This would honestly be trial and error. Buy one shock, try it. If it fits, we're good. If it doesn't, then you're going to know right there because they look similar. I agree with you. But are they going to fit 100%? Honestly, it's trial and error. Not something that I've actually heard. It's actually a very interesting idea, and it would work for what you need it for. But as far as fitment, it's trial and error. Peter Andrews, I have 2008 Lexus RX 350, small leak in the power steering with ATP 205 help stop the leak. If it is, what is the capacity of the power steering in an 08 RX 350? Can't find it anywhere. So I will begin by saying this. Please don't use stop leak, not only for the power steering, but for anything else. All the stop leak does, and we're talking, as far as I know, I'm not really an expert on stop leak products, which I don't even like them. There's one for the radiator, which checks your head gasket leaking. That's the scariest one. Power steering, AC, all this stuff. The problem is all these products they work on the short term, but then they cause major issues on the long term. Basically, all they do is they have little particles that kind of find their way toward the leak and clog it. That's the word I'm going to use here. But in that process, they're going to clog everything else that is supposed to have a small passage. Valves, in the case of coolant, for example, they're going to clog radiators. And the first one they clog usually, never clog the easy one to replace. They always clog the heater core. In the case of power steering, they clog the pump. So you're going to stop your leak, but then you're going to destroy everything else. I highly don't recommend it, and I wouldn't honestly use it. As far as capacity, the standard size, like I want to say 346 mil. They probably take 3 bottles of that total capacity, somewhere around there. Ryan Morris, 16 4Runner fog lights only work when high beams are in, not low beams. Is this normal? I'm wondering if that's a typo or it's the opposite. So they only work on low beams. When you put the high beams, they shut off. If that is the case, that is normal. That is just a requirement of law. That's too much light output. So they want you to not have auxiliary lights when you have your high beams on. So yeah, that is normal in that case. But if it's the opposite, it's kind of interesting and weird because that's the opposite of what the law should allow the manufacturer to do. Brian Cooley, 2002 Lexus ES300, 155,000 miles, in great shape. Shop says needs valve adjustment. Okay. He said, runs great. Don't fix it unless it gets louder. Worried he won't find bucket shims of OEM quality. So the first thing is, why are you doing this? If it is to just maintenance, don't. These engines really last a long time without needing a valve adjustment. And actually, if they do need valve adjustment, I would question what happened. But if it is loud for whatever reason, and they suspect that's the issue, the dealership should still have the shims. They might be a little harder to get. They'll take a little bit of time, but this is unfortunately the kind of job that you take it apart, see what shims you need, then you order them and hope they show up within a few days. They could take longer. Usually dealerships will have a bunch of these shims from the old days just laying around somewhere. We actually swap them because we don't even charge for them. I mean, I have a bucket that accumulated over the years. Do we just use them because there's nothing that goes bad, and we're not going to charge customer and have the car down for a few days to just get parts. So you can get them OEM, and that's the only one. I wouldn't use aftermarket or anything else, especially on something like that. Big Hamza 22, good evening. Looking into buying a 2016 Land Cruiser. Anything I need to be aware of? Rust is the biggest thing with these. It's not a major issue yet, but you do not want to buy a rusty one. And probably the only common thing is few interior stuff. The radio can be wonky a little bit, but check the seat belts and the seats. We've had a few issues when they switched over to the facelift model, if you would, with seats not moving. If I remember correctly, it was an $8,000 seat. It's just a whole assembly. You can't get anything with it. So check the seats, make sure the seats are all operational. There are no issues. And the only other issue they have that we've seen quite a few of is water pump leaking. Not a major really issue, but check the coolant, check the water pump is leaking. It's kind of hard to see. You got to pull all the covers underneath it. But other than that, these are solid. I mean, solid, but very, very expensive. I mean, ridiculous expensive, but because they're worth it. So Ryan Morris, yes, that is in that case when fog lights. Yes, then in that case, it is normal. Folks, and this is for everybody else. I want to make sure that you know this. All Toyotas, and at least in the US, maybe other parts of the world will have it differently. So when your fog lights are on, you're driving in low beams. When you put your high beams, the fog lights will shut off. That is by design. That is normal. That has been around for a very long time. I remember a mod that we used to do. I'm talking 89 Supra that I've owned, even the one after it. The mod was to make it run when the high beams are on and make it run when you put it in like the first position. That was a common mod. So yes, they won't run in high beams. So XSEJ, what do you think about the shuddering vibration from second to third while accelerating on my 2009 V6 Venza all-wheel drive? Replace trans fluid, no change, CV joints, no leaks. So the other thing, if this only happens on acceleration, I would look at the drive shaft, the one that goes from the transfer case all the way to the rear diff. Look at they're not as common, but the mounts for the rear diff. But the main thing is its drive shaft. That's the one thing I would chase after, because vibration on acceleration or hard acceleration, especially only, I'll be looking at axles. I'll be looking at drive shaft. That is one thing that causes that vibration only on acceleration. So Michael Johnson, when doing a pre-purchase inspection for a used car, is there any way to find out if the engine is burning oil? Unfortunately, there is not. Um, this will go by the history of the car. There's really no accurate way to know. People will say, "Oh, look at the blow by," but you know what? That can be very misleading and inaccurate. So be careful with that. Don't judge a car just by, you take the oil cap and see some smoke. That's not an indication. That's not a good way to check these. But unfortunately, there's not, and that's where it comes. Your research is important to know, okay, this engine is common for oil consumption, this engine is not, but it could develop it. If the maintenance is not good, let's look into the maintenance of it. That's how you really know. Otherwise, other than driving it or doing running a scope down the cylinder to see if there's any damage to the walls. But then again, it could be not to that stage. It could be that the rings are starting to seize. It's really hard to tell accurately, honestly, about that. Jake Duncan worked on any high mileage over 100,000 mile third generation Tacoma. How are they holding up? So they're holding up okay. We actually had a few like around the 150,000 mile range. They're holding up okay. They have their common issues. The 16 still seem to have the most bulk of the issues. but the 17s get better, 18s get really good, and after that, it's been very well. We recently had one, and I was just talking today about this one. I posted a picture of it on Instagram, the two-tone one. It's been in an accident, and it's a 16, has well over 100. I think it had like 130, 140,000 miles. Um, Everything under the sun is leaking on it, but again, it's been crashed. The frame is damaged. The thing is trashed. Nothing was fixed. The main thing is, were things fixed? Were those leaks caught when the car was under warranty and you took it to a dealership and they took care of it, and now you're not going to have these problems again? Or somebody just never went to a dealership for any inspection, never really took it to a good mechanic to inspect it and tell them, hey, you got this leak, you got to take care of it, you're still under warranty. If you never did that, you just took it to Jiffy Lube for oil changes, they're not going to check for this. And guess what? You're out of warranty and you never took it, and then found out about the leaks, traded it in, got a ridiculous trade-in value for it because everybody wants a Tacoma today, and then you end up buying that car and it's not holding well at that point. But that's how the scenario of this is. So far, they're holding up really well. There's no new problems developing other than the third brake light thing, which the leak on the third brake light, which now became a campaign, which is good. But otherwise, no new issues to report. Zig 8100, looking for a Sienna 2012 to present one. Which year do you recommend for reliability? What's the most mileage it should have for so you can keep it for long years? So my general recommendation on that generation Sienna is 2014 to 2016. These are the seems like the best years for 2015 and 16. They updated the interior. It looks nice. If you're shopping today, get the updated interior. That's when they fixed most of the little issues. They can still have common issues. Minivans are very reliable in their segment, but when you compare a minivan with a Highlander, with a Camry, they can be a little bit higher on maintenance and repairs. That is normal because of their size. But if you want to come to the present one is getting a lot of press right now because of their gas mileage. Their gas mileage is really good, and people really like that. And I think that is something that's um, people, you look on the internet, nobody cares. It's just a minivan. I notice when I make a video about minivans, there's no interest in it. But in the real world, where people are actually buying these left and right, there is very high interest because it's a very good concept of here's a giant minivan that can really take you and all your family that gets 30 miles to the gallon. That is pretty impressive. And knowing that it's going to be a reliable thing because it's nothing is new in it. It's all reused, repurposed stuff that have been out for a few years from a manufacturer like Toyota. It's a very appealing deal, and I think it's a pretty good van. But the older ones, they were terrible on gas mileage. Just so you know this in front before you go and buy it and find out. But 14 and 16 is the best. Skip 17s. They're okay, but the transmission could have issues, and they are covered. But why take that if you're shopping, you don't already have one? Just skip the 17, go with 18, late 18 and up. These are the best year. If you want something on the lower budget, more DIY friendly, more simpler, 15 and 16 are good. The 11 to 14, they're good, but they're also racking up miles and they're getting a little older. So you got to be a lot more careful checking these because many people just drive and they don't really maintain these. That's the problem with the minivans. So you gotta be careful when you're buying one of these minivans. So Chris Brett, what's the hybrid life for an '07 Highlander with good maintenance? Do you still see them come in with high miles? Yes. And actually, I do have a story for you guys about this one. Quick one. We actually have a 2007 or 2006, I don't remember the exact year, Highlander hybrid with over 200,000 miles currently at the dealership. We begged the owner to get rid of it. They would not get rid of it. They are spending $10,000 on this car. I just it is a rusty thing. It's old. It has a lot of miles. There's come a point with these with rust where it's just beyond repair. It's not worth it. Even with the current market, it's just not worth it. But yet this customer is spending $10,000 fixing all kinds of things. It's not worth it. I wish they would have said no and walked away and got, order a car or whatnot. But as far as the life expectancy, it's really hard to tell. With Struts, it gets cut in half with these. Otherwise, they're really good. The biggest expense is going to be your hybrid battery if it ever goes out. At some point, it will. Really hard to put a mileage on it. I've seen ones that have well over 200,000 miles and the battery is fine. I've seen ones at 80,000 miles and the battery goes. Depends how you drive it. Is it stored all the time? Do you keep that fan clean? It depends on all of these things, but it's really hard to put an exact number on it. But overall, they're okay, but most people didn't maintain them, especially the fan battery, the fan filter like intake. Charles He have a 2013 GS350 with blind spot monitor, but does not have rear cross traffic alert. Is it possible to add rear cross traffic alert? It is not possible, at least at the dealer level, because it's not as simple as plugging in, uh, just plugging in the new software and life is good, because there's so much software that you need new hardware to work with that software. So it's not something that is unfortunately possible to add. I wish it was possible, but it is not. So I'm gonna look at something here. This is Carl Caronut is the sheriff in town, and she picked something up that I should see. Sorry for the delay, guys. Okay. So let's take this one. CMA. Hi, Ahmed. Please help me. I have a 2015 Corolla 1.8 CVT transmission. Once in a while, when I was driving on the highway, the car wants to cut off once I release the gas pedal for a second. So does this happen to be, I need a little bit more information on this one, and perhaps you can leave a comment when we are done with the live stream so I can take a look at it. But is this a eco model, or is this just a normal LE, XLE, or S model? Because if this is an eco, it could have a problem with the Valvematic. And another thing that I think about, it's cutting out. Is it dying completely, or just the RPM is dropping? If the RPM is dropping too much, you might want to clean the throttle body. This is something that I would start with. But if it's an eco model, it's going to need some inspection on the Valvematic, because this is one of the symptoms of the Valvematic, where it just drops the idle too low and sometimes kill the car when they just start having the issue with the Valvematic actuator. So those are two things. If it's not an echo, then clean the throttle body first and see how it changes from there. David N, how often should I change the transfer case, front and rear differential? So on the 2007 FJ Cruiser. So the transmission every 60,000 miles or 6 years. Transfer case, front rear diffs every 30,000 miles. I do have a video coming out pretty soon. Not how to change them, but talking about the fluids, specifically the manual transmission fluid. Today I had a Tacoma, and I'll share this with you. Today I have a Tacoma here, and it's a manual transmission 2017 Tacoma. A viewer brought it, and he's like, I want to replace the transmission fluid on a manual transmission. I'm like, that's a great opportunity. Let's make a video. But he brought the fluids, AMSOIL fluid, and it was an incorrect fluid because it was GL5. So I was like, that's okay. Let's just drive to a parts store here, and we'll find some fluid. There was none. It was all GL5. And it was a surprise, because the ones that said GL5, they were so confusing. Folks, I'll say this before the video, and you'll see the details of the video. Be careful with manual transmission fluids. Most of them are GL5, and that could actually damage the transmission. So long term, not short term, but be careful with manual transmission fluid. Jeff Sasaki, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. It was all yellow. Can you talk about the Supra brake recall? Can I wait until the next oil change date, March, to bring it in? Yes. So the brake software, the brake recall, is actually just a software update. You can. I don't want to come out and say that you can wait on a safety recall. If it's possible, take it in as soon as possible. If it's not possible, then the next service appointment is okay. But if at all possible, take it in, take it, get it taken care of, and life is great. That way you don't have to worry about it. But I don't want to come out and say on a safety recall you can wait. I wouldn't wait, honestly. So let's continue here. Erskine Presley, what is the most reliable powertrain available in Toyota? That is a really hard question to answer. It would be much easier to say what's the worst ones, and I'll tell you. But there's so many good powertrains. I think the current generation powertrains that we have, they have their issues. And look, every engine have their issues, no matter what, because it's made by imperfect humans, and things are going to happen. But compared to others, I think the current generation engines are really good. The 2.5, the 2.0, the dynamic force range, and then the V6, the updated V6, they're really good. Um, Transmissions wise, the 8 speed has been improving. It started really rough and things got much better. The truck engines, the updated 3.5, even the V8, and now we're going to have the new 3.5 twin turbo. The twin turbo, it's in limbo a little bit because I actually did some more research. There are a few issues with the upcoming 3.5 on the Tundra, but I wonder all these issues are on the LS 500. How much did they change of this engine for the Tundra? There's no information anywhere that I can share, but we'll see how that goes. But so far, the 2.5, the 2AR-FE engine is very good if you change the oil on time. Otherwise, it could be a disaster. The 2GR is very good. They have their common issues, but overall, it's a very solid engine. The updated 2GR is also good. And of course, the dynamic force variants, the 2.5 and 2.0, I think they're really good so far. George, I have a 2016 RAV4. I saw your videos and common issues. I saw the part where timing cover leaks. My RAV4 isn't leaking oil, but the timing cover looks greasy, always at the same spot on the aluminum. So, George and everybody else, that's the common leak spot on these 2ARs. It's not a major concern. I said it in the video in an attempt for you to keep an eye on it. So if you have a warranty situation, extended warranty situation, so you can track it and get it taken care of before your warranty runs out. But if you only see the greasy part, that is a seepage. That is actually the leak that I'm telling you about, but it's just starting. If the ones that leaked, you'll see oil all the way to the bottom by the oil filter. But the ones that are starting like that, it could take years before it actually turns into a leak, and it could just remain like that. Don't clean it, leave it, especially if you have warranty, and see how it progresses. Just keep an eye on it. Every oil change, kind of pop the hood, look at it. Is it progressing or is it still the same? But I wouldn't be concerned at this point, especially if it's just a smidge and it's just a small, very small seepage. Martin Quintana, have a 2018 Tacoma. When I am cruising around, hit the gas slowly. Sounds like a diesel kind, like a car, like a cat purring. I've heard about the valve problems and also some timing chain problems. Is this normal? It could be normal because the direct injection. When the direct injection kicks on, it's going to get very loud, and that's normal. Unfortunately, these engines are getting louder and louder. It's not something I am concerned about. Um, if you are in doubt, take it to a dealership, but be prepared that they will tell you the same. So if you're going to pay for someone to inspect it, I wouldn't. That is a normal thing with these, that they're very loud like that. Nothing to be concerned about. That's normal characteristic. Um, Charles Bronson, is it worth getting a 2022 Forerunner without KDSS, or do you recommend getting it with it installed by Toyota, or maybe install later? Install later is not as simple as that, but KDSS is helpful if you go off-roading. If you don't plan to modify your Forerunner, let's put it this way, that's a better way to put it. If you don't plan to modify Forerunners, get the KDSS, because it's going to give you kind of a comprehensive package. It will drive nicer and everything. But if you plan to modify, the KDSS will just be in the way, and it'll make modifying a lot, possibly more expensive, possibly even limited. So that will be your guideline. If you plan to modify it, forget about the KDSS, just modify it and life is good. if you don't, get the KDSS, but it's not something very, very high on the list. Don't go out of your way to get the KDSS. I guess the best way is drive the one without the KDSS. Do you like how it drives? Do you don't mind that nosedive when you hit the brakes? If you don't, then don't waste your money. And as far as adding it later, it's not as simple as adding it later. The frame is different, so it's not an option, honestly. Daniel Forrest, any rumors on the fuel tank size in the 2022 Tundra V6 twin turbo MPGs fall off a cliff with when towing? Toyota fuel tanks are often frustratingly small. So I honestly, at this point, I cannot share much information on the new Tundra, the 22 Tundra, mainly because we have some information, but out of respect for Toyota and their team and everything, I cannot just share this information until it becomes public. I have told you guys that. But I have seen the Tundra a long time ago. We knew the engine a long time ago, and all the information that now every journalist is cycling through, I call it the dryer. Um, we've known this since 2020, let's put it this way, but I cannot share all the information until it becomes public. But rest assured, as soon as I am able, and it's possible for me to go ahead and release this information, you will hear it, you will see it, and we'll have one right here where I'll dissect the thing and I'll show you exactly what's what with everything. But as far as fuel tanks, Toyota did have a large fuel tank for the older one. I think this one will have someone in between, not as large as the old one, but not as small as some of the newer ones. And I agree, some of the newer ones are getting really small fuel tanks. But it's going to be somewhere in between because they're trying to improve the gas mileage. They can't put a giant tank that weighs a lot when it's full, and that's kind of going to be counterproductive. As far as towing and gas mileage don't go very well hand in hand. So it's always going to be a compromise with towing. But think of it this way. If with the old Tundra, without towing, you were getting 13, 14 miles a gallon. You start towing, you get dangerously close to 10 miles per gallon. If the new one gets over 20 miles per gallon, let's say 25, and you tow with it, now it's getting 21. Well, that's a giant improvement, in my opinion. So that's the way I would look at it. NICAD, I have a 2008 Highlander with 133,000 miles. It has had a rear differential transfer case fluid change at 55. Doesn't have a front differential fluid that needs changing. Don't know if the trans or brake fluid has ever been changed. So your Highlander only has a front transfer case and a rear differential that is serviceable. The front differential is actually part of your transmission. So when you change the transmission fluid, that's when you've actually replaced the front differential. That's why it's called a transaxle, because it has the transmission and the differential in one unit. So it looks like you're good there. Just make sure your transmission fluid has been taken care of. Other than that, your brake fluid, it needs to be tested. Really, it's not something very high on the maintenance list because they really take a long time, especially if they haven't been tampered with, old fluid hasn't been used, or by mistake, or the cap missing. That's a common one too. So otherwise, I wouldn't worry about it, and just get the brake fluid tested, and life is good. So 2006 Yaris has a 1349 code for a VVT system fault. Check the filter. It was clogged and replaced. OCV looks fine, but the code came back. So if the filter was clogged, there's contamination in this engine. I've never seen a VVTi filter clog. If it's clogged, you have heavy sludge, and unfortunately, it's going to take a lot more than just replacing that. You might end up replacing the cam caps, the gear, because now all your passages are clogged. I know the filter is there, but the filter can only do so much. So that's your next heading. You're going to want to flush the lines, try to get them clear. If they don't, then you might end up needing take this thing apart and find out what else is clogged beyond the filter. Speed Tactical have a 2021 Highlander Hybrid XLE. There is a whistling sound from the dash area when going 45 miles an hour. Dealership replaced. Weather seal still happens. So this one you're going to have to go back with the dealership on. A very good way that diagnosis wise is to use tape. Painter's tape works great. You basically try to isolate the general area where the whistling or the noise is. Apply tape over it, basically seal it off. Another thing that is possible, and I'm not suggesting this is the issue, is does it change pitch when you put it in recirculate or fresh air? Change that and see what changes. We're trying to find a pattern. Activate the wipers. Does it go away and come back when the wipers? We've had some whistling wipers lately. No, it's usually nothing big, but the main thing is it the windshield? That's another thing. Windshield will cause a lot of whistling when they have a tiny little gap, and you might not have a water leak and all that, but they're going to cause a lot of whistling if they have a pinhole leak in their seal. That's another thing that's very easily checked. Just with the tape method, put the tape around the windshield. It's kind of hard at the bottom, but you got to put it all around it and then drive it if the noise goes away. That is actually the issue, and the windshield needs to be pulled, resealed, and put back. Whaler GA, does running a C system on recirculation too much decrease of the life of the system? It does not. Running your AC on recirculate does not actually. The system works easier. It's easier for the system to run that way because it's all that cold air is being circulated back. So now it doesn't need to work as much to cool the air versus pulling that hot air from outside. But the one thing about recirculation is you're always going to get that same stagnant air turning around, and using your recirculate all the time will actually start causing the bad smell from the AC. That's the main reason, especially when you park it and it isn't recirculate. You always want fresh air in your car whenever possible. I understand some of these cars actually automatically go and recirculate, but try to get it out of recirculate. It's always better to get fresh air when the car in front of you is smoking and you smell a bad odor. Then put it in recirculate. Once you get past it, then put it back in fresh air. It's actually better for your car that way. I understand it puts more load on the system, but health-wise, we're talking, it is better. Okay. Nick Grant, what's your opinion on the new 2020 Tundra? So we're gonna hold off on the Tundra conversation. And I know, look, we can start talking about the Tundra, but I'm not going to betray the trust that Toyota puts in us by sharing some of the information. So trust me, when there is a Tundra in here, you will hear everything about it, things that you've never heard about them, technical details, a full series on it. It's all planned and ready to go, but just we need the okay from them to release the information. So keeping them honest, I guess. Toyota is a company I respect deeply, and I can release information and know I won't get in trouble at work. But it's a matter of respect at this point. V8 Coupe would like a video on changing the coolant on a sealed system Toyota, as my 2009 is probably due soon. So I want to do a video on the simple, like I call these a simple coolant replacement. Just dump the coolant and fill it. But for the meantime, V8 Coupe, you're just gonna drain the coolant, fill it up with an overflow funnel. You can find that on the Amazon affiliate store. And just let it run until the fans cycle twice. Heater off, AC off. I know everybody's so stuck. You know what? Let's talk about this real quick. The AC, the coolant replacements. Everybody's like, you got to run the heater. You have to run the heater. You do not. Unless your car has a valve that physically closes the flow of coolant to the heater core, you don't have to have the heater on. Actually, it's kind of counterproductive because you're trying to get the thermostat, they're trying to get that engine to temperature so your thermostat would open and you can circulate that coolant, push all the air out. But if you have the heat on, you're gonna take much longer to get to that operating temperature where the thermostat would open. It's kind of counterproductive. Do you see my point here? And then the ones with the valve, usually the valve's right there. And the ones, I'll give you an example of the ones that have a valve, like first generation Tundra, first generation Sequoia. Those had a physical valve. Instead of running the heat and having this thing take forever, you could just pull the cable, disconnect the cable, and just pull the valve. It's a mechanical valve. So thought I'd let you know that because, you know. Eric Kalinak, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate your generosity. Zig 8100. I need a transmission fluid change on my 2013 Camry V6. How can I know if they did right or not? I feel like it might be better to not change it. I'm worried that someone not doing it right. Well, I mean, this is an upcoming video too. You gotta trust your mechanic. If you don't trust your mechanic, you need to find a new one, and you should not trust them with the simplest thing or the biggest thing. It is very important that you, as a car owner, establish a trust relation with whoever is fixing your car, because if there's no trust, everything goes out of the window and then it just turns not good. So on the transmission fluid, the only way to check is really to redo the job. That's the only way. Check the fluid level. I mean, if they're using the right fluid, that's good. Even with that, there's not really a way to know until there's issues. So if you bring the fluid, maybe that's a good start. But checking the fluid level, I have a couple videos now on that. One of them is probably more specific to your car. You can go through the process yourself if you don't have a trustworthy mechanic. So Ryan McPherson, ever heard of the Toyota Crown going to import one soon to Canada as a daily 1JZ GTE? Any experience or knowledge around them or that engine? This is not professional experience, but I do know what the Crown is. That was where the country where I come from. They were very common. They're kind of, if I would put it this way, I would put it's similar to a GS, the old GS. It has the same platform. They are very similar in a lot of ways, like the GS 300 with the 2JZ. The 1JZ is a great engine, and it is, you're saying, a GT, so that's twin turbo, common with that engine and common with that really era of Toyotas. Two things. First one is the turbos are notorious to go out, the sequential turbo, especially at this age. The other thing is the fan. It didn't have a mechanical or electric fan. It had a hydraulic fan, which runs off the power steering. If it has that, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Just replace it. They're notorious to stop working, overheat the car. Now you have all these issues and then leaks. And if you have that system, keep a close eye on it. If it's working, if when it stops working, get rid of it. Get yourself a proper electric fan and call it a day. JK, can you comment on disabling proximity key fob operation on a 2020 Highlander? Hold lock while pressing unlock twice on the key fob. That is the process, but I'm noticing some of them start to having a little bit of a different process. JK, do me one favor. When we are done with this video, leave me a comment on this same video or anywhere on the channel, and I will have to double check the process for you so I can give you an exact answer, because some of them have been changing lately. So Brent Mahler, I'm scared of the next generation Tacoma will be a 4-cylinder only. Well, honestly, they kind of are already. If you think about it, there is a 4-cylinder Tacoma, and it's slow, but it's great. So I would have been a lot more concerned if there was a 4-cylinder Tundra. That's way too much. I think is way too much. But I don't think the Tacoma will be as bad with a 4-cylinder, believe it or not. Even the 4Runner, because let's face it, these cars are not meant to be fast. As long as they have enough torque to get them around in off road and get better gas mileage, hopefully, it should be okay. But the V6 is, for now, the current V6 is there to stay. I hope it stays with the next generation, because that's right around the corner. Same thing with the 4Runner. 4Runner is probably going to lose its V6, but the V6 in the Tacoma is newer. So that might stay. And the next generation 4Runner is either going to take the V6 from the Tacoma, or is going to get a new 4-cylinder. We're going to have to wait and see in that one. Jason Montejano. Great. Spanish was great last week. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. So I have a 20 Tacoma for two-wheel drive. Developed a jerk while going from drive to reverse, reverse to drive when parallel parking. Should I be concerned? Jason, the only thing I would check is the transmission fluid level. It could happen that's the reason it's developed that. But otherwise, if it happened once only, I wouldn't be too concerned. But if it happens every single time, then I am. And unfortunately, at that point, it's going to need diagnosis, maybe start with a fluid replacement or whatnot and go from there. TJS, my Toyota dealer, says transmission flush is safe to do. I heard drain and fill is safer. Your thoughts? Which So that's a debate of the century. If your car does not have extreme miles, doesn't have 100, 150,000 miles, and it's never been changed, a flush is good, but it needs to be followed by a fluid level check. At the dealership where I work, we do both. We have a machine and we have the regular drain and fill, it's whatever you want. Um, they're both safe as long the flush is safe as long as we're not doing this as a last minute measure. If you're doing it at higher miles, never been serviced, you might want to just do a drain and fill and play it on the safe side. Joseph Pickle, I have a 2021 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro Off-Road Premium. It comes with a TRD Pro exhaust. The exhaust drone is pretty tough on long trips. Okay to swap up the style? Absolutely. You're not going to have issues with warranty. I mean, as long as you're going with stock exhaust that's correct for this car, you're good. There shouldn't be no issues. So, Sween, yep. Sorry if I misread that. Had a 2021 Highlander hybrid Highlander all-wheel drive. Any common issues y'all seeing on the fourth gen? I should keep an eye on. Don't really see many TSBs on this. So they have been pretty good so far. It seems like the 2020 had a few minor things, but the 2021 so far so good. Just the random stuff. You might have heard the whistle one. That does happen with new cars here and there, but it's not something that I would say chronic, where every other one gets the same problem. So far so good. They're doing really good with the Highlanders. Vishal Mohan, hey AMD, I have a 2021 RAV4 XLE cold start. When I put the transmission in reverse, it jerks. Check the transmission fluid level. That is the only thing I would do. Um, you also might want to give it a few moments to warm up, because some of these cars, when they're super high idle and you put it in reverse, it's going to jerk, and that's normal. But if it's not that case, then do check the transmission fluid level, as it could be low. That's one symptom of when these transmissions are low. I know it might be a newer car, but you'd be surprised there. Check the fluid level. Carlos Berrios, I have a 2007 Toyota 4Runner and advice on replacing the oil dipstick tube. It won't come off. Yes, that is very common on these. They get stuck. Um, Unfortunately, there's a point where you might end up damaging it and might needing a new one. It's basically the O-ring that is stuck. So a good way that I found, and I know on that one there's not really a lot of room to do this, but I'll mention it anyways. Um, you're gonna want to rock the thing back and forth. You're basically trying to walk that O-ring off. The O-ring is stuck. And by the way, make sure you have a new O-ring, because it's probably going to get destroyed in the process. You're going to want to move it side to side, left and right. Left to right is going to be hard, but side to side might be more possible. That's the only way you're going to get them off. And if it doesn't, then you're going to have just to grab it with vice grips and kind of violently pull it and tap on it, and at that point you're going to damage it. But that's very common, unfortunately. The O-ring gets seized. By the way, make sure you spray some PB Blaster, some penetrant, rust penetrant, right around where the tube goes in the oil pan, so once that O-ring starts moving, it has some lubrication just to pull all the way out. All righty. So Sanjin C, question, opinion, RAV4 2021. I keep my cars long, 11 to 14 years. I live in Canada. My question is about all-wheel drive and high mileage reliability with the years. I understand needs maintenance. So they are reliable for the most part. And you going with the LE, you kind of skipped over that. What do you call it? The torque vectoring system, which is kind of questionable at this point. I don't want to say it's unreliable, but it had some issues initially, and time will tell. It's not proven, but the only LE is proven, and it's pretty tough. It's a pretty tough system. Yes, it does need a little bit extra maintenance for the fluids, but overall it's a very reliable system. And in Canada, you can only decide if this is required or not. But as far as reliability, the system is very reliable. It's been out for a very long time, especially on the LE, not the torque vectoring. So Manalunu, are the new Tundra engines direct injection only? No, sir. They are D4S. They have both direct and regular. So Carbman 007, Thank you so much, sir, for joining the live stream. I appreciate you. Paul PB, 2015 Camry, 120,000 kilometers, four cylinder. It is a pain to drop. Is it a pain to drop the transmission pan to do fluid and filter change? I know it's a heavily discussed topic, but I want to hear what the master thinks about it. Um, the thing about the only I'm trying to remember here by memory. I used to work on so many of these things. Look at the bolts, especially the ones closer to the subframe. You're going to have one or two bolts right at the back. Some of them might be hard to get to. That's your cue. Before you even drain the fluid, before you even start the whole job, go to these two bolts. If you some of them, some models, you can get the whole thing. You can get all the bolts very easily. Some of them, that last one or two bolts right by the subframe, are kind of hard to do. And solution to that is just loosen the top of the engine mount on the side on the subframe and just jack up the transmission. You'll be able to get to it right very easily at that point. Otherwise, if you can get to these two bolts, it's very simple. Just drain the fluid, take a bunch of 10 millimeters, drop the thing, change the filter. It's super simple at that point. I mean, this is simple too. Just jack up the transmission a little bit. It's not a big deal. 119 millimeter, and the mount separates, or you can take the three at the bottom. The mount has two mounting points. You can either take the top one nut, or the three 17 millimeter bottom nuts. But either way you do it. But I'm just going by memory here. I think that one you can actually remove without doing anything. You just need kind of a swivel to get to it, but that's about it. So Peter York, I'm looking to buy a one or second generation Toyota Sequoia. I did see your video talking about Tundra. How these two vehicles are different from each other. Can you do a video about the Sequoia comparing two generations? Yes, I would love to do a video on the Sequoia. I'm trying to get one. Apparently, they're kind of harder to find at the moment, but the Sequoia is very similar to the Tundra. Where they really differ is the back rear suspension, which in the Sequoia, other than occasional rusty, sticky alignment adjustments, they're solid. The rear end doesn't really have problem. The air suspension is very reliable. It's just a great SUV, honestly. Um, just watch my video on the Tundra, not the whole thing. Some of the stuff will not apply, but mainly the engine and the transmission. Transmission really doesn't have a lot, but the engine mainly, they have the same common problems. It's exactly the same engine, and it's a very good buy if you buy one that is clean. And rust, I cannot emphasize how important it is that you do not buy a rusty one, especially in the first generation. They were terrible with rust. Otherwise, they are one of the best trucks ever made. um, just don't buy a rusty one, and don't buy a neglected one. They're good trucks as long as you take care of them. IL, new 2021 Camry LE Hybrid has been sitting on the lot, not sure what the manufacturing date. Could the battery have issues now? Should I just order a 2022? There's a wait because of COVID. So it depends on the how long it's been sitting. If it's been sitting for over a year, which I doubt, especially at the current climate, it should be okay. It has a very long warranty on the battery. I wouldn't be concerned, honestly. Brendan O'Hagan, you just mentioned 2021 hybrid whistle issue. I have this above 45 miles an hour, drives me crazy. Dealership last week said they tried, no progress. Well, the dealership can't just say, especially under warranty, let's just go back on this. I wish we can, but we cannot. The dealership cannot just say, well, we tried, can't fix it, sorry, have a nice day. That's not how the world works. And if they are telling you exactly that, where, well, we tried to fix it, but it's not getting fixed, so I don't know what to contact Toyota corporate. That's not how the world works. Usually, when a dealership can't fix a car and they have a problem, we have a lot of resources to get to. Starting with Toyota, they can send their field tech. They could send a lot of help our way. We can't tell a customer that just spent a small fortune on a car, has a warranty, oh, we can't fix it. That is not good. If they are giving you a hard time on fixing it, give them a chance. Give them at least two chances to get this right. Maybe the first time they messed it up, give them a second chance. If the second chance doesn't work, go directly to Toyota corporate and just flat out tell them customer support number, customer experience center, and explain to them you're not happy. This is a new car. It should not make noise, a whistling noise like that. That's the track I would go from here. Denzel Fashington. Hello, Corolla Hybrid 2020. My girlfriend shifted into park while moving 5 to 10 miles an hour. I hear the cracking noise in the transmission. Everything works fine, but are the days of my transmissions are numbered? They are not. Don't worry. Not something that I recommend you do. I understand it was an accident, of course, and things happen, and it's okay. But damage that could happen, if it didn't happen, then you're good. Don't worry about it, brother. It's things happen, accident happen. Don't feel bad. Don't make her feel bad. Treat the lady with respect, even though this is kind of a interesting situation. But still, nonetheless, you're good. You have nothing to worry about. All right. So, DJ, since lithium batteries charge and deplete faster, does that translate to more often electric power, hence better gas mileage on a hybrid? It does, because now the power there's more power available. I'm trying to explain this the best way I can. There is more power available, and there's more power capture possible. I hope that makes sense. That's how this works. They're just more lively. Lithium ion battery doesn't mean that the nickel metal hydrides are not, but the lithium, now they're trying to squeeze every little thing. So when you go to lithium ion, the possibility is a little better, where they can push these cars to get even better response from the hybrid system and better gas mileage. So Yusel Vecina, 2004 Sequoia. I have put $500,000. Half a million. Okay, I'm assuming this is miles, because if you put $500,000 into a Sequoia, um, yeah, that's 500,000 miles. What are the steps on checking the transmission fluid level after a drain and fill? Now, memory is getting a little faded here, but if you do not have a transmission dipstick, then this is a sealed transmission. I have a video on that to walk you through step by step. If it does have a dipstick, you're just going to run the truck, let it warm up with the engine running in park, pull the dipstick, check the fluid. You want to get it somewhere in the hot range. It's never going to be 100%, but close enough in the hot range. If it is a sealed transmission, there's a whole other procedure for it. Kind of hard to explain it in this format, but I do have a video for it. If you couldn't find it, just leave a comment and I'll find you the link and post it. Kurt Helm, 2021 RAV4 Hybrid XLE. How do I adjust the headlight horizontal beam aim? So all Toyotas will have the star ring thing. If I'm not mistaken, they were an 8mm. Sometimes it can mean in kind of an odd spot. If that is the case, you can either get a wrench to that once you find it. There's usually two of them. One for I'm trying to remember, the RAV4 only has one, so it should be one. You turn it, it's an 8mm bolt, but it also has like a kind of a ring behind it. If you can't get to it at all with the 8mm, then you can take a screwdriver and kind of move the slots. Be careful, because they're really flimsy and you can easily damage the housing. I'd rather you do the 8mm part, but just park it against your garage or some wall that is a lighter color. Adjust it both ways. Turn that thing one way and see where the light's going, and then go from there. Steve Yu, what size socket is used to remove the spark plug on a Toyota? Do all Toyota use the same spark plug size? No, there are two sizes. There's the 5/8, or I believe 16mm, something like that. And the other size is the 14mm, like the real thin wall, shallow. And it has to be, that one I think has to be a specific socket. But the other one, you can use any socket, but preferably a spark plug socket. So it would grab the plug and pull it with it, that has some kind of magnet or grabbing device or rubber. So Zuhair Amur Musa, I have a Corolla LE 2014. I have very hard steering wheel. So the first thing I would check, oddly enough, is the battery. This is an electric steering car, and when the battery is really weak and the alternator can't keep up to charge the battery and supply for the power steering, it actually get a hard steering wheel. If that is not the case, and it's doing that even at higher RPM while you're driving, it could be something mechanical, intermediate shaft, something of that nature. And it could be as simple as very low tire. So there are a few things to go here to check, but these are things that I would start with. Steve Yu, what do you think of using Toyota connected services to keep track of your vehicles? I seem to recall you saying there could be a problem when you start or stop using connected services. So that was back when that video came out, and an update on that. Things have been getting a little better. Every new technology when it comes out, there's issues, and things have been getting a little better, where we still have this problem of when you stop the service completely, like opt out all the way and then opt back in, there's like a delay. There's a few day delay until things get reactivated, and that causes a lot of issues where people are like, okay, I just paid, where's my service? And nobody seems to at any point tell you this is going to take 48 to 72 hours. It's okay if you're told that, but when you're not told that and you're told, yep, you're all active, life is good, and you go test it, it doesn't work. I understand your frustration. You just paid money to reactivate something and it's not working. But with connected services, there is a delay when you stop and start service, usually 48 hours. It could be even up to 72 hours. So bear that in mind with connected services. But most of the little really annoying issues where it flat doesn't work, even when you haven't stopped the service, those are getting much better. Just so I thought I'll let you know that and give you guys an update on that. So Jorge Lopez, my 2005 Camry 3.0 with 190,000 miles has always had 5W30 conventional oil changes. Can I switch it over to synthetic, or is it too risky? You can switch it to synthetic, but honestly, if you got this many miles and you're doing conventional oil changes on time, I don't see really the benefit, but it's up to you. But you can change it without issues. Brand Murphy, I see someone have asked about Tundra. I am too wondering what are your thoughts on the twin turbo. The twin turbo is okay, but there, unfortunately, after doing some digging, I found some issues. We talked about this, but yeah, we'll wait and see. Once I get the A-OK, then you'll see a lot of information on it. Hayes Goodman, any hints for freeing frozen rusted nuts on bolts for front muffler? Heat Shield 2012 RAV4 V6. So spray down with penetrate. PB Blaster works really good. WD-40 really doesn't do much for that, but you can try it. PB Blaster is we use it a lot in the shop. It works really good. Try not to use heat on, if you're saying rusted down the balls for the front muffler heat shield. That goes on the body. Problem is, what's on the other side of that is the carpet. And you start heating that up, you could actually burn the carpet. So soak it with PB Blaster. The longer you let it sit, the better. And just go for it. Unfortunately, if the stud breaks, and the stud breaks, that's just the part of dealing with rusted stuff. Another thing you can try, um, the only way you're going to get this off is with heat if PB Blaster doesn't work. But there's a tool, it's very expensive, and I don't know if this is a DIY setup or not, that it uses inductive heating. That is basically a giant thing, has a coil that goes out, a wire. You put it around the nut and you just hit a button and it'll turn that thing cherry red in like a second. Yes, it's going to transfer some of the heat to the body and possibly the carpet, but it's not an open flame. So it's a little bit safer. We use this a lot as well. That would be the last, but this, we're talking about a very expensive $300-400 tool. If this is a DIY setup, you're gonna buy a very expensive tool for one application. I don't know. It depends on your situation and how you want to. I want to say it was. I drew a blank on the name. Maybe I should do a review of it because it's a really good tool. But it's something with inductive heating. I forgot the exact. It had a name. It's a brand name too, but it escaped my mind. If I remember, I'll say it in the live stream. Zoo Jeffrey, question: I am looking to buy 2005, 2010 Toyota SUV such as the Highlander, RAV4, Sequoia. What should I look for when I go check the vehicle before I buy it, and which would require the least maintenance? The RAV4 and the Highlander will probably be about equal maintenance-wise, especially if they're all-wheel drive. Sequoia will likely be a little bit on the higher side, not necessarily because they're less reliable or that, but one small example is tires are going to cost more, gas will cost more, oil changes will be a little bit more costly. The basic maintenance, they're going to need more brakes. The brakes are more expensive. It's maintenance that is more expensive, not necessarily it's a bad car. You really can't go wrong with any of these three. Um, just make sure you buy a good example. And if you're not mechanically inclined, you don't have experience with them, take it to a mechanic, have them check it out. Make sure it's that mechanic you trust. We just talked about this earlier in the live stream. If you don't trust your mechanic, you need a new one, or why don't you trust them? Find a common ground, talk to them about it. But as far as the older cars, reliability will start falling off at some point around 15 to 20 years. Not going to plummet where it's unreliable, but you can't realistically have the expectation of buying a 15-year-old car that had okay service history and just drive it another 15 years with just brakes and tires. Things will start going out, but not catastrophic as long as you're buying one that has good service history and been taken care of. Colorado Boo, how you doing, man? It's good to see you. So Durval, except for cleaning the filters, anything needed for RAV4 Hybrid 2020 to keep it long miles? Not really. Just keep up with the maintenance, take care of the car, and it'll take care of you. I did it my way. Let's rock, man. Good to see you. Iman Jones, how do you keep the paint new? So you want to, because some people will say, well, you got to hand wash it and you can't take it to a car wash, the automatic car wash. Look, folks, I take my cars to automatic car washes because you know what? I don't have the time to hand wash my car, and I am not exactly paying someone a small fortune to hand wash it for me. I don't, because I don't have time. That is just not. But make it a regiment every year to, if you really want your paint to stay in tip top shape and you are using an automatic car wash in between, every year have it detailed, professionally detailed, if you don't have the time or the knowledge or the expertise, and most importantly, either ceramic coat it or wax it. That'll protect things, so when you do use your automatic car wash, it's not as abrasive to the paint. That way there's some ongoing maintenance on the paint. I'm not a paint expert, but I do like to keep my cars clean. But I do use an automatic car wash because I don't have the time, and I am just an average Joe that I don't have time to be out with a bucket when it's negative 20 degrees outside. That's not going to happen. Boyd Gooey, will Toyota ever turbocharge the 2.7 Tacoma? Likely not, because that engine is actually potentially going to go out of. Unfortunately, that engine is reaching its end where you're not going to see it anymore because of emissions. So turbocharging it is really not going to bring it back. So there is a high likelihood that that engine will go with the next generation, unfortunately. So there's another question. My 2013 Venza V6, Superman. My 2013 Venza V6 has excessive noise and vibration, and whenever I accelerate from a stop, the car vibrates a lot. I mean, the car hums and rumbles and vibrates whenever I come to a stop. I can feel the car shifting gears as the car slows down via the steering wheel. Wow, that is very interesting. 2013 Venza V6. I wonder if you have an issue with um, some mounts or potentially a axle or a drive shaft. If you can feel the shifting through the steering wheel, there's something catastrophic that is going to be very obvious to find. Either a loose mount, a broken mount. Nothing really that is common that I can think about, but this is going to be something very obvious to find. And um, I would look at axles. We've had a few cases where the rear prop shaft, the U joint completely lets go, and now it's just flopping around. The center bearing, not as common, but this is the most common for vibrations that we've seen, not only in the Venza, but across that cars with a similar platform. Safe El Tabakchali. Why Toyota dealerships parts are expensive, $170 for 6 plugs? Well, that is actually a very good question. A question that we were talking about today, me and the viewer that was here with Tacoma that I told you about, guys. Um, Toyota is a business. The reason parts are sometimes expensive is there is a middleman. Toyota buys Toyotas, for the most part, they don't make their own parts. They buy them from somebody. That somebody needs to put their profit on top of these parts. This is how the uphill struggle gets. That manufacturer puts their profit on top, sells it to Toyota. Toyota sells the part to the parts to the dealership. Toyota puts their profit on top. So now the mountain is getting higher. Then the dealership sells the parts to you at the price that Toyota set. They don't set the prices, which is MSRP for parts. So now they put their profit on top. Now you have this whole like triple decker thing on parts. That doesn't mean that it's a ripoff. That's always been the case with Toyota, with original parts, not just with Toyota, with everybody else, because nobody else sells it. They are the only people that sell these parts. They are expensive, but you know what? In the case of Toyota, they are expensive because they are best in most cases. But the main thing is, and this is actually sparked a video topic that I added to the list, and we'll see when we can get to it. If you really shop around online and know how to find these good deals, today we were looking at rotors for a 17 Tacoma. The viewer asked me, it's like 17 Tacoma is going to need pads and rotors soon. And he's like, should I get aftermarket? Should I get original? The originals can be expensive. Should I consider turning the rotors? I'm like, look, your rotors are heavily warped. They have rust. You might need new rotors. That will depend. You got to cut it and remeasure and see the minimum thickness. But we looked up the MSRP for rotors. They were $84.99. And I was just sitting here with my laptop and I'm like, okay, well, let me look it up. I start doing my research, and all of a sudden, at $84.99, I found the same original ones from a dealership, not from some random seller on Amazon or eBay, for almost $50 each. Do you see that price? And then I go look aftermarkets, they're the same price. So now I'm buying originals for the price of aftermarkets. Pads were the same thing. Pads were, I think MSRP was $55. I found them for $30. It's just a matter of how you research or where you find it. And I am going to make a video so you can actually see how part research, original part research online. But can they be expensive? Yes, they can get really expensive, but it's just supply and demand, unfortunately. But if you do your due diligence with shopping, you can find them for a lot cheaper. Miguel Naka, I have a 2020 Highlander hybrid. Saw your video about the TPMS. Went to the dealer, said that all TPMS sensors need to be programmed by them. Well, that's not the case. Do you have the old style? I don't think the new Highlander does, but do you have the new style TPMS sensors? And that you can easily tell that if you have a rubber valve stem or a metal TPMS sensor. If you have a metal TPMS sensor, then they are correct. That is the old style, which I doubted for a 2020 Highlander. But if you have a metal sensor, it needs to be programmed. If you do not, put the sensor on, drive. It'll take some time, but it'll actually pick it up and program itself. I don't know where the dealer lives in. They probably want to, I don't know, you know how dealerships can be sometimes, but they are incorrect in this case because it needs it. That's the whole big deal about the new generation, which Toyota finally is joining others, which other manufacturers. You can just put the sensor, drive it, the car will eventually pick it up. So that's incorrect from the dealership, unless it has an old style, which I kind of doubt at this point, unless I see that you are from Canada. So it could be different, different countries will have different specifications. So you're going to want to look into that. If you have a metal sensor, then yeah, they are right. So Michael Minauro, the transmission on my 2015 RAV4 has a slight whistle from first to second. Is this normal? It is somewhat normal. And I would call it, if it is similar to a whine, like a slight whine as it's shifting, that could be normal. And all transmissions do this, but it's just, it gets to a point where certain things wear it a certain way, and now you hear it. That is common and not something I would worry about. Fizz out. Can rusted bent backing plates cause the parking brake not to work well? Shoes have uneven wear with 30% contact and a bit of an angle, not perfectly perpendicular. Some shoe tabs are floating in the air away from the backing plate contact points. Disassembled, assemble, can't find anything wrong. Tried bedding in, which helped, but still parking brake doesn't hold. So there's something about Toyota backing plates, and let's cover this briefly. Especially the ones with like the integrated parking brake inside the, what do you call it, the rotor, like in the middle and the inside of the rotor cap. So the backing plate will have a solid metal plate in the middle of it, and the backing plate is just welded to it. What usually breaks when they rust out, fall out, is that outer shell that just is basically a backing plate. But the middle part, which is a much thicker steel and houses all the parking brake, is usually much stronger and very hard to rust out, unless we're talking extreme rust here. But the other thing about the parking brake is the shoes will always have weird wear on them because they're always stationary. They're not really, they're not like drum brakes where they're going to expand and be that, because they're not providing braking force. They're just there to hold the car. As far as them being pulled out like that, you might have a bent pin, not pin, like the little cap that sits on top of the string. They're notorious to stretch, where now it's like the spring doesn't have as much tension to push it. So a good way, and this is just a small insider tip, take that cap that sits on top of the spring that the pin goes through and locks, flip it around, you're going to see it elongated. Take a hammer, tap it. Just flatten it, not too much. Just give it a couple taps, put it back, and see if that takes care of your problem. Because all it is that spring doesn't have enough tension to keep that shoe in place. That's what I would try. Otherwise, adjusting them usually takes care of them not holding. So David F, thoughts on the new Tundra? We've covered this already. I don't want to take the time from other viewers. TJS, my Toyota dealer, says transmission flush is safe to do. Says it's low pressure and goes in the same direction as when the car is running. What are your thoughts? So as far as the process of the, let's cover this because I think it is an important subject. As far as the process of doing the flush, what the machine does, all it does is take fluid from one side, measure it, as much as it's taking, it's putting back in. So as far as the process itself, it is safe. But what is not safe is when you have a high mileage transmission that have questionable service history, you do not want to replace the entire capacity of the transmission. Folks, this is a heavily debated subject. It's a very long subject to cover, and perhaps a video will explain this better. That way we're not taking your time. But the idea is not the flush process, it's the final result. Transmissions, generally, you do not want to replace the entire capacity of the fluid. Most people love to do that, and they want to see that bright red fluid. That's actually not good for the transmission. You want to get some of the fluid out, especially the one that is sitting in the pan that collects contaminants, because you're kind of in a small battle. You want some contaminants to stay, some to leave. So the flush takes care of all that. But as transmissions age, you're going to get to a point where these contaminants are actually what's causing this transmission to continue going without slipping and having all these issues. When you take them all out, now we have issues, because then, yeah, the fluid is clean, but it no longer has these little contaminants that help the clutches engage and all that. And now we have a problem. So the flush is safe as long as your transmission is not way long overdue on the fluid. If it is, then stay away from the flushes because they might be too aggressive, replacing all the fluid at once. Stay with the drain and fill. Colorado Boo. Last week, I changed the rotors and pads of my son's '08 Suzuki SX4. And now they are squealing like a pig. How do I fix it? So the main thing is you want to, and if I remember your name is Rick. I know you. If you want to see two things. One of them is, do you have like a piece of metal that is contacting the rotor? Usually the fitting kit where the pads sit, are they bent where something is installed backwards? Maybe, things happen where they are contacting the rotor and making that squeal. That is very simple. Lift the car up, turn the wheel by hand. If you don't hear it, then likely it's not a mechanical squeal. You know what I mean? Like two pieces of metal touching each other. If that's not the case, then it might be the pads themselves. If they're, I don't know if they're aftermarket original, it might be the pads themselves that are causing the noise or the lubrication. If these have shims in the back of them, brakes always make noise. You're just trying to make that noise not be as loud. But brakes always will make noise, by the way, not noise that you can hear, but under hard braking, they're going to make some noise. But the insulation of the car and the noise of the road will make you not hear it. But the idea is when you put grease between the pad backing and the shim that sits on top of the pad, that grease, some of that harmonic vibration that makes that squeal actually that you hear, that grease kind of dampens it and you don't hear it as loud. That's the whole idea of putting grease on pads on the back side. So if you don't have anything, that squeal, that harmonic is going to get so loud that you're going to hear it. So check your grease on them and make sure you don't have mechanical noise. Winston Jong, are there any problems with 2016 RAV4 Limited all-wheel drive with 20,000 miles? I am looking into purchasing one. Regards, stay safe. Well, 2016 RAV4 is actually a year I recommend you buy. It's a good year. 20,000 miles, doesn't have a lot of miles. Just check the service history. Make sure it got oil changes. Make sure it was taken care of. It was not driven like it was stolen. I do have a video with some common problems on this specific model. Most of these problems will affect the previous years, like 2013 to 15. But the 16 is actually when they did the facelift, they updated a few things and things are better for it. Jay, my 2001 Celica is a base model without ABS system. Is it difficult DIY to install ABS system in it, actuator, module sensors? Honestly, anything is possible when you have an infinite paycheck checkbook. Sorry, but is it worth it? Honestly, it's not, because the cost will be very high unless short of finding one in the junkyard and basically swapping everything over, because you also have to swap computers and wiring and all kinds of stuff. And if you're buying everything fresh, it's going to be very expensive, where it's much easier just to sell it and go buy another one that has ABS. That's the God honest truth. I don't want to give you false hope. Anything is possible when you throw a lot of money at it, but is it logical? It is probably not. Brian Terrazzo, what's your opinion on 2011 Avalon? Why does the same year ES350 require premium fuel and the Avalon can use 87? Are they the same engine and transmission? So they are, but the tuning is different, and they went with that premium thing. They could have just kept it the same, and it has the same power of level, and life is good, and we use 87. But these were the times where Lexus was trying to be a premium brand, and putting premium fuel in the car was cool. It made you like the Germans, and they were trying to compete with that unnecessarily, because their cars are never going to be like the German cars. And that's not a bad thing, because you know what? The German cars, they are very exciting to drive. They're beautiful to drive, but it will take the Germans 2 million years, light years, to get even this close to the reliability of Lexus. So that settles the argument. I speak from personal experience. I know both of them. I own German cars, and I know how crazy unreliable they can be. That's just the way they are. Beautiful cars. But you know what? That premium factor is what makes them cool. So Lexus tried to copy that at some point, unnecessarily, really. And speaking of Lexus, and I actually should have said this at the beginning of the live stream, but if you're still watching, I'll say one thing. Lexuses are coming to the Car Kirna channel. I gave up on trying to find a Lexus to feature in a video, because apparently y'all don't want to come visit me with a Lexus. But I'm getting one. I'm getting a rental, actually. I'm renting it out, checking it out, and for another reason. But hey, Lexus content, specific Lexus content, is coming to the channel very, very soon. We're talking probably in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to get it. And give it another week or two after that, and you will start seeing a lot of Lexus content, because you all asked for it, and I appreciate everybody that was patient on it. And so it's coming very soon. And in my opinion, on the 2011 Toyota Avalon, it's a very good car, as long as it's been, of course, taken care of and maintained, but it's a very good car. JSZ, what is your best recommendation for a used SUV around $10,000, such as Highlander first generation, second generation, 2006, 2012 RAV4, or 2001, 2007 Sequoia. Which model year would be best for what I'm looking for? So prices, I cannot tell you prices because they will vary. A $10,000 car in Chicago is not a $10,000 car in Arizona. That's just supply and demand. It depends on the markets. But what I will tell you is the models that you listed. The first generation Highlander is very good. The better ones, in my opinion, is 2005, 2007. They're really good. Between the first and second generation Highlander, if you can find a really good shape second generation Highlander, go for it. But it's safer bet to go with the first generation, believe it or not, because the second generation, that was the birth of the 2 GRFE, and they did have very slight issues at the beginning, namely the rattle and cold start. So I'd rather you not buy the first year of production, buy the previous generation, last year of production, which are actually very good cars if you find one in good shape and doesn't have rust. Rust is going to be a big factor with all these cars. 2006 to 2012 RAV4. Honestly, 2006, 2008, even 9, even 10, even 11, even 12. Um, they could have oil consumption issues, so you got to look into that. 2006, 2008, you're going to want to look into what's that engine fixed. 2009, 2011, 2012, actually, you do want to make sure that the services were done on time, because if they were not, that engine can burn oil and it could be a disaster. The V6s are much better. They especially got better from 2009 onwards. Sequoia, all the years are good. Notably, 2005 and up to 2007 are probably the best. And rust is the big thing with the Sequoias. If they're rusty, walk away. They're not worth it. JJFF. I am interested in buying an early 2000s Lexus ES, interested in 300, 330, and 350. Curious to know what I should look out for buying one private party, looking for ultra reliability. So the ES 300 and 330, they're very identical actually. They're both really good cars. One thing with these early Lexuses is the screen, the radio screen. This is going to be surprising to say this, but I remember this from those cars. Um, the radios are very expensive, so make sure the screen works fine. Which there were some issues with those. They don't have anything like chronic with these years, but they're very good. They're ones I actually recommend. But if you're, again, we just talked about this with the RAV4. I would take 350 out of the equation if you're looking for the early ones. Don't buy the first year. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2007. Don't go with the first year, because that's when they had some issues. But I personally think the ES 300 and 330 feels nicer than the following year ES 350. That's just personal opinion. That's up to you to decide. But as far as reliability, oil leaks, maintenance history, power steering leaks were somewhat common on these. Valve cover leaks are common on that the 300 and the 330. But we're not talking big stuff. This is old car stuff. That's normal, But as long as they don't have major, or it's been leaking forever and nobody fixed anything, then it's a concern. But if it's a small seepage here and there, not a big deal. If this is a rusty car, again, watch out. Folks, I cannot emphasize how dangerous it is to just go without inspection and buy a car that is completely rusty. It's a really bad idea. Please be careful. El Gallo de Joe Valdez. 2021 Corolla has a small vibration between 20 and 30 miles an hour. Is that normal? Does not happen at other speeds. Well, the vibration, if it's in steering wheel, if it's in the body of the car, this information would help me give you a better answer. But if it's in the steering wheel, possibly something with the front tires, typical vibration stuff, we're going to take it for a drive at a dealership. And if we suspect it's something with the tires, we're going to balance the tires. There is a little bit of process involved with vibrations, but as far as 21 Corolla, I do not have anything common. The only other thing is, did they deflate the tires when they did the PDS service? This is common with some questionable dealerships not to do that. Ali Jamil, Camry 2007 2.4 engine, whining noise, sound like the sound is not that loud. When the engine is cold, when the engine heats up, the sound gets a little quieter. Okay. Disconnect the connector on the alternator. This is something very, very common with these. The alternator winds, although from your description it could be something else. But disconnect the connector, not the big wire with a 10 millimeter that has a cap on it. Just the connector. Disconnect it. If the winding goes away, you might need an alternator. Otherwise, unfortunately, it's going to need in-person diag to see where it's going on. One thing with these, they had, if it's not the alternator, um, try to feel out for the noise. I have a video on how to diagnose engine noise. If it's coming from the intake manifold, they had a common issue, and if that's it, I wouldn't worry about it because it's just the way the baffling of the intake. You need to replace the intake manifold to get rid of the noise, but it's not really an actual problem that I would worry about. So in that case, I wouldn't worry about it. But make sure you isolate the noise first to a place. Guillermo Pelayo. My torque converter was replaced in my 2012 Toyota Camry XC, the best car I ever made. That is my 94 Celica. I'm joking. When I had 120,000 miles in, planning to keep this car as my main driver, will you recommend? So, if you had the torque converter already replaced, I would just continue to replace the transmission fluid every 60,000 miles or 6 years, and you will not reoccur have that torque converter issue because the software update takes care of the issue. I haven't seen Camrys of that generation where they had the torque converter replaced and then again have the same problem again. So I don't think you're going to have the issues again. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Carrie Christian, I have 2007 Toyota Noah, and the paddle shifters have stopped working. An idea the problem could be. Unfortunately, we do not have a Toyota Noah in the US, but as a pointer, and this is not going to be 100% accurate or based on experiences, just from hearing your description of the problem, the paddle shifters go through something called the spiral cable. So the spiral cable is clock spring in kind of generic lingo. Um, it's possible. I can see it that it's the cause. Check all the functions on the steering wheel. Does the horn work? Cruise control? Any other buttons? Do they all stop working too? Do you have an airbag light? That's usually indication that you might have a problem with the spiral cable. Simple wiring test will test that, but usually that is something that I would investigate when you have an issue with the paddle shifters. Net Flutter. Do 2021 Camrys come with a reusable oil plug gasket? Yes, folks. So let's talk about this real quick. If you have a Toyota and it has a blue drain plug gasket for the engine, that is reusable. But there's come a point, let's say 2, 3, 4 years into it, you're gonna want to replace it at some point. I personally always replace it because it's not worth it. That's just my opinion. It's like less than $1. Come on. But if you are in a pinch and you need to use it, reuse it. You're good. Don't worry about it. Just don't over tighten that drain plug though, because the tendency to do that when you reuse that gasket is much higher. So Matthew Orea, I have a 2021 4Runner TRD Pro ORP. Everybody puts ORP. What's ORP? And I really love the new features on the 2022, especially having Lunar Rock available in select models. Do you think the newer model is worth trading in my 20? That is a very tough question. Likely, honestly, and I'll say this to you, with the current crazy market that we're in, if you trade in your 2021 4Runner TRD, you're probably going to get exactly what you paid for it, unless you overpaid for it, then that's a different story. The problem is securing a 22. Do you have a 22 available today? Because the trade-in is going to be like a few $100 basically, if we're really being honest. But usually dealerships are asking too high for these cars if they are available, for these trucks, even if they're available. And if they're not available, then now you're out six to 8 months, and by then the problem might be over and your price will drop and the more miles you put on it. Honestly, it's not worth it. I don't see what new features are available. There's not really much have changed between the 21 and 22. They added a trim, and otherwise they're all very identical. So personally, I would never do that switch. If you had like a 2010, 11, 12, yeah, they're similar, but there's a lot of upgrades that might be worth it. But to trade a 21 for a 22, honestly, I wouldn't. That's just my personal opinion. All right, folks, I'll take two more questions, perhaps. I'll just go through and choose one random question and then take the last question. Let's see here. Let's see. Let's pick this one. Willie Jones. I have a 2015 Corolla LE with 97,000 miles. I've been experiencing excessive vibration while idling. I've already replaced my spark plugs and engine mounts with OEM parts, still no luck. So the first thing I would do is clean your throttle body. Um, that is something that is very common about these, especially when you disconnect the battery. It shouldn't. You've already been on. You replace your spark plugs, your engine mounts, and you still have the vibration throttle body. And the other thing is, do you have oil in the intake? That is something that we're actually seeing a few cases of. And the intake manifold gasket. That's a last one. And the throttle body on these, and this was, I'll admit, more common on the previous generation with the same engine, but the throttle body, if it doesn't sit right, if it's ever been apart before for whatever reason, if it doesn't sit right, it'll leave a little gap on the side and it could leak vacuum. It's not going to show up as codes. It's going to show up as a vibration or like kind of an erratic idle. So these are the few things that I would look for in this case. James Carroll, thank you very much for joining the live stream, sir. And yes, we're all looking forward to the Lexus content. It's actually going to be, I'll share some with you. It's going to be an ES 350, the newest one. I think a 21. I don't remember. I don't know. Maybe it's a 22. I don't know. We'll see what we get. But it's in, if I end up getting that one, it's in Pepsi Blue. Very interesting color. A very interesting color when the color says Pepsi Blue from Lexus. That's very interesting. And we'll see. The ES350, I just saw that Spider Logan. ES350 is an Avalon. And that's, have you seen the new 86 in person yet? No, not yet. It'll be here sometime. By the way, do you guys, I'll read this later. If you're watching this later, leave a comment. Do you want to see content on the 86 or the Scion FRS? That is something that I do get a lot of requests for it, but I want to verify before I actually start chasing it, maybe after the Lexus. And by the way, if you live in the Chicago area or surrounding areas and you want your car featured in a video, do send me an email with the title Chicago service request. I know you're not requesting service, but just write it like that, exact words, and we'll get it something set up and we'll get you in for, because I need some of these cars. With the current market of cars, it's really hard to come. There's not even used cars to look at. I can't even get any of these cars in to check them out. But yeah, it would help if we can get some local to help with that. So with that said, let's take the last question. And usually, if you've been watching my live streams for long, I usually take the very last question because the last is always first. And Rick T. AMD, please respond to the Wayner channel's question. He already repeatedly asked the same question 14 times. I am puking. Actually, I will not, because I asked you politely at the beginning to not repeat your question 10 times. That is not fair to the other viewers. And as Rick T, who is actually a very dear viewer of mine, said, that is not nice. This is exactly why I asked not to do that. But we'll take the next one. Oh, this is actually a follow-up. Superman, this is in regards to my 2013 Venza V6. The vibration can be replicated by pressing the gas pedal and brake at the same time at around 1,000 RPM. The car vibrates a lot. So I thought about this as we were going through the live stream. There is a motor mount at the top, like It's not really an engine mount. It's more like a torque rod. And it's a common design with Toyota. Um, it's right by the engine. Just pull the engine cover. You'll see it right there when you open the hood. It's it, it's called a dog bone mount because it looks like a dog bone when you have it out. Check the rubber on that because that kind of stops the engine from rocking back and forth. If that's completely torn, that could be your issue with the vibration. But otherwise, this is going to really need in-person diagnosis because something that big is going to be obvious. But check that rod mount yourself and see if that's something that's moving a lot. Maybe typical diagnosis, but this is something dangerous. I wouldn't try it yourself. But basically, open the hood, look at things as you are brake torquing the engine, and that usually will see if any mount is broken. You'll see it lift or whatnot. Um, Anything of that nature. All right, everybody. So now that we are done with the live stream, I'll tell you a few things. A one car coming from somewhere in the United States for your one car care nut. Uh, the first thing was we said what was it, September 22nd, they told me. Okay, well, that passed, and it's like, did you build my car there? No. Okay, then they said October 27th or something like that. But now we are sitting in a very nervously inaccurate November 6th. The whole idea was if I could get the car this year, um, then I don't have to drive my S550, my dream car, in the winter. But I guess that's not going to happen. We're going to have to drive it in the winter, which I have news, by the way. Um, the S550, my Mercedes, I don't know if you all know about this one. I made a video about it. It's my dream car. I've wanted this car since I was a kid, not this specific car, but an S Class. Um, the first 2 years were terrible with this car. It was it always needed something. Good thing I had an extended warranty, but for the past 6 months, I want to say, since I sold my other hoopty that I was driving, it has been squeaky quiet. Nothing. It almost feels like this is the quiet before the storm. And what storm is coming? Am I going to find out this storm next year? Hopefully, I'll get the other car, the Toyota, this year, so I can not drive that thing in the winter. But I don't know. It's been very quiet. What do you guys think? It's should we call it? It's been I don't dare want to say the word. It's been um, reliable for 6 months. I probably put 5,000 miles on it already because this year, but it's interesting. That's We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, she continues to behave. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the live stream. We'll see when my Toyota shows up finally, but we're gonna have some Lexus content here very soon. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And sorry, one last thing. We're not gonna have a live stream next week and the following week, actually, because I have some family events. I'll see if I can reschedule it. Maybe we'll do it at a different time, different day. I'll let you guys know. Just keep your notifications open. Not just subscribe. Keep your notifications so you can get notified when I put stuff on the community tab of the channel. If you don't want to do that, regularly check them because I put some announcements there when there's something important. Uh, all that I'm seeing here. Yes. So there is one request before we close the live stream. And I'm sorry about this. I told you we're leaving already. We're back. There's one question that the car care nut, Mrs. Car Care Nut wants me to answer. Eli Alvarez. My name is Eli. I'm 19, currently working at Toyota of Irving here in Dallas, Texas as a detailer, but my real passion is working on cars, and I wanted to get your opinion on what's the best way to begin. Eli, first, thank you for your interest in the automotive business. It's a very tough business, but it's a good, rewarding one if you put your time in. Um, the first step for you, you can either start your way at the bottom of the dealership and work your way up, or get some sort of education. UTI does a good program for Toyota, or a program called T10. And that would be the way where I would start. And I do plan, there's somewhere in the video list where I need to do a series on how to become a Toyota technician from the very beginning all the way to the top of the chain. But the main thing is you're either going to go school route where it kind of pushes you up on the certification level, or you're just going to start, just start. Ask if you're a detailer at a Toyota dealership right now, ask them to give you an opportunity as a loop tech or like an entry level. Change oil, start getting your experience on your hands. They will be, you will be heavily supervised at a dealership, but you you got to start somewhere. That's what but all I can tell you is, with a lot of work and hard dedication, and you are young, and I am inspired by your age, that you are already working a job, and it is actually on the verge of being a career. Detailers, when they have enough experience, that's actually a career, and you can make really good money on that. But if you want to be it, you're young, you're strong, you got this. You go for it, man. And I will root for you. And I wish you were in Chicago. We are hiring. I would have you working right next to me. Guys, thank you so much for let's all wish Eli best of luck. I hope you make it, you become a great technician. And if you have any questions along the way, just leave a comment. I'll help you, my brother. I wish you the best. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Until the next live stream, which will be maybe in 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half. We'll see. I'll see how it works. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And you guys have yourself a wonderful day.